Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back, welcome back, welcome back to Horror Analysis with me, Drew. How you doing? I'm doing well. Today we're continuing with History of Horror, and today we're going back another 25 years, from 1825 to 1849. And as far as Howard Phillips Lovecraft, who is still our map for this History of Horror section, is concerned, this is all about this guy. There's no cover. There we go. All about this guy. The Edgar Allan Poe. Can you see it? There you go. Got my complete stories. I got like my old book. I like the old books. 1966, which was pretty cool. I'm happy with that. So Poe, yes, Poe has the only author in here to have his own chapter. It's chapter 7. Almost positive. I did write it down, but whatever. Chapter 7, which Chapter 7. Hey, I remembered. And yeah, so the Modern Masters is the other option. That's chapter 10 for him, and there's 4 authors in there. Poe is only the person to get his own chapter. He shares it with Baudelaire that much, but we don't really talk about Baudelaire because we're not really talking about non-horror stuff. Not that Baudelaire isn't influential. He is in horror. The guy I'm reading now, which I still haven't finished his book because I've been so involved in, I gotta read up on Poe stories, so I've been reading this, and I gotta catch up on what's going on in here, so I had been reading this, so I've been missing out on the book I'm reading, which was Leslie Whitten. Leslie Whitten actually was a good as a translator into English of Baudelaire's poetry, along with writing horror books and being I think he's also a reporter, or was at one point. Yeah, so Poe, and then his contemporaries as well. Let's have Poe up here. Actually, yeah. So Poe was 1809 to 1849. Those are his dates. It's 40 years, not a long career by any stretch. About 10 years longer than Robert Howard, and only the really good die young, I guess. First published in 1927. So this section, smack dab, is Poe's section. Yeah, so Lovecraft Chapter 7, pages 52 through 57, is talking about Poe. Now, and he starts talking about the specific stories on page 56. So 4 pages is talking about Poe in general. Poe would be, during Lovecraft's time, Poe was kind of talked down about by the intelligentsia, the intellectual elite, or whatever. What was Lovecraft's term? I don't have a bookmark. I should. Here we go. Advanced intelligentsia. Now, Poe, according to Lovecraft, is one who's basically getting the system down. We know that, of course, Poe is very much influential to Lovecraft by Lovecraft's own admission. Lovecraft famously said, "I have my Poe works and I have my Dunsany works, but where are my Lovecraft works?" he didn't see his own work in these things. Anybody reading Lovecraft, of course, sees only Lovecraft stuff. Maybe they see the Sonic influence. I really only see the Poe influence in his diction and his word choice. They're both both very particular about the words they use, which is good. I'm okay with that. But I mean, I don't really see Poe in Lovecraft as much. Poe is the father of the modern short story in Lovecraft's view. I don't know where exactly he says that. And I'll even buy that because, short stories before that, I guess, were a little bit, tales, or, it was different. Of course, next time we're going to be going back another 25 years and talk about Washington Irving and those short stories. So, I'm not sure how much influences one came to another, and who's the real true father, and that's silly to say the true father of short stories. Things just happen, I get why some people would say X and Y, but as to say that they're the true father of something or other is kind of tough to say without going through all their predecessors, which I'm not going to do. It's just not worth it. Sorry, I'm getting distracted. Hot water too. So, Lovecraft is going to mention some of his other stuff about Poe's like mystery type stories, or his his not quite weird tales, his not quite horror. But those are good. I mean, Murder in the Rue Morgue was made into a film, as we saw in the 30s and 20s and teens, about 6 times. As it is, it's a murder mystery. It's a weird, not in the Lovecraftian sense, but it's just a weird murder mystery. So, yeah. And of course, there's lots of movies that are not or books, stories that became movies that are not cosmic fear in Lovecraft's sense of the word, but, become staples of horror genres. Of course, Lovecraft is like Noel Carroll in saying you have to have, I'm not saying you have to have a monster, you have to have cosmic fear in Lovecraft, something that makes you think the world isn't right. And that's what gives you the creeps, and that's what makes it a horror movie, horror story. So, Pit and the Pendulum, stuff where there isn't supernatural elements aren't going to make the cut for Lovecraft. They're going to be related because, of course, they're related. Telltale Heart, not in one that Lovecraft talks about all that much. He talks about the supernatural ones. Yeah, so the manuscript found in a bottle, I actually, in my research today, I was listening to a lot of stories. Today I listened to Metzengerstein and Manuscript Found in a Bottle. If you're looking for this one, by the way, it's MS Found in a Bottle. I don't know why they keep changing it from manuscript to MS. That was the abbreviation in the day, but it took me forever to find it in my complete works. But I listened to the Manuscript Found in the Bottle today, and I listened to Metzengerstein on LibriVox version. LibriVox is that free audio. LibriVox.org is a free audiobook place for public domain books. It's great. Metzengerstein had a very thick accent in the reader that I was listening to, but it was still good. Manuscript Found in a Bottle was really good, even though I did have to read along with it just because it had sailing terms, because it was so nautical, and I don't know anything about water. So, Manuscript Found in a Bottle is essentially a guy is on a boat, washed the crew is washed ashore, washed overboard or whatever, and then another boat slams into him, and he ends up getting tossed onto that boat, where no one knows he's there, even though he's walking right up to the captain and whatnot. No one seems to notice him at all, and they all seem to be acting weird, and then they all drown. Spoiler. Well, and then he realizes that they're all going to drown, and then throws the bottle with the manuscript inside of it off, then they all drown. We're not sure if it's a ghost ship. I'm not sure if it's a ship with the souls of the drowned sailors or whatnot. Very weird. Everything was weird about the ship. Everything. So yeah. The next one down the list, The Facts in the Case of M. Valdemar. Lovecraft describes this one as 56 true, come on. Kept together by hypnotism for 7 months after his death. Narrative of A. Gordon Pym of Nantucket. South Pole, which is sort of like the Manuscript Found in a Bottle. Similar. That ship was headed towards the South Pole as well. There's murderous savages where nothing is white, and where vast rocky ravines have the form of titanic Egyptian letters spelling terrible primal arcana of Earth, etc. Metzengerstein. This one was cool. This is one that they should teach in school and don't. There's two families that have fought for forever with each other. The young guy from one of the families' parents die, so he's 18 or whatever, kind of young, impetuous, whatever. And you don't know it, but you basically know that he burned down the other guy's stables because the other guy was really into his horses. And the other guy ran into the stables and died trying to save his horses. And the next day or whatever, he comes down to his stables, and the grooms and whatnot are fixing up a new horse. Say, hey, we just found this horse running around. It had smoke all over him. And there's like a brand in the front of him with the other guy's initials. And the kid seems to think it's a great idea. It's like, oh, okay, I'll ride it. So he rides it and he falls in love with it and he keeps riding it every day. Even though it creeps everybody else out. Later on, mysteriously, his house catches on fire while he's out riding, and the horse, dragging him along with it, jumps into the fire, jumps up the stairs, runs into the house, runs up the stairs of the house, and then jumps off the stairs into the burning inferno. And as soon as his body hits the flames and is consumed by the flames, poof, the fire goes out. It's not known that it's really the other guy that he burned, but it's the other guy that he burned. One of those. But it was really good. I was very impressed. Man of the Crowd was kind of weird. I listened to that not too long ago. Actually, no, I didn't. I couldn't find it. I had to read it in the book. About a guy who's just always walking around trying to find a crowd. Like, he doesn't sleep, he doesn't eat, he doesn't stop. He just keeps going from one place to another, walking around London. London? I think it takes place in London. Trying to find crowds to hang about in. Mask of the Red Death, pretty much everyone is familiar with this one. There's a plague sweeping through the land. The nobles all lock themselves in a cathedral with 5 rooms. There's a banquet in each. The Red Death shows up as a person in a mask, as the rest of them are in masks because it's a mask, and everybody dies. I remember this from school and having to understand that each of the rooms was a different stage of life, so it brought death to the babies and the young people and the middle-aged people and It's such a good story if you didn't have to deal with a nonsensical pardon me. It's a good story if you catch the underlying symbolism, but if you're forced to look for the underlying symbolism, that was what ruined it. As a high schooler, it's not a bad story. Silence a Fable and Shadow a Parable I listened to recently. Actually, the reader was the same on both, and it was good. They were both good. Shadow a Parable I think I liked more. Kind of Mask of Red Death-esque. These Greeks or Romans or people in togas, whatever they are at a funeral, and a shadow comes out of the wall while everybody's looking down at the table, and no one looks directly at it, so it keeps coming closer to it. No one looks directly at it. They look at the reflection in the table until it starts talking. Did I forget from last week when I read it? Yeah, I think it just starts telling about its life as death, as part of death. Does it kill everybody else? I'm just getting it confused with other stories now. Silence a Fable was another guy in a toga. The guy goes to a river in Africa. A guy in a toga is there, and everything's making too much noise. So the guy curses everything, and nothing makes any noise anymore. It's weird. Legeia, I finished not too long ago as well. That one was good. That one's not one that's well known today, and that one was really good. I think Lovecraft actually had a better description of something than something I could come up with, so let me actually switch that to it. Beg pardon. 57. Tells of the first wife of a lofty and mysterious origin, who after death returns through a preternatural force of will to take possession of the body of the second wife, imposing even her physical appearance on the temporary reanimated corpse of her victim at the last moment. It was spooky. It was not scary, but the atmosphere was really weird. I wasn't sure if the narrator was just under a spell for the whole time he was talking about how much he loved his first wife. He's like, yeah, she was so beautiful. She was beyond beautiful. Let me describe her. And then she describes it, and I'm like, man, she must have looked really weird. And she was so smart, and she was so blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, this is creepy. No one should be that into his wife. I didn't mean it that way. Any future wives I might have. Didn't mean it. Anyway. Yeah. And then the Fall of the House Usher, which is one that everybody knows. Evil family-ish, and then house breaks in two. Stuff. It's stuff. All these, I think I can recommend all of these. Well, I haven't read these number 2 and number 3 on the list. The rest of them I can certainly recommend. And of course, Telltale Heart and the rest of them that I'm sure most people have read already. I'm sure you could find this for less than $10. We used to sell it at Borders for $9.99 in the bargain bin. I'm sure you can still find it in a bargain bin someplace for $9.99, or your local used bookstore. The poetry is great as well. Annabelle Lee for weird poetry, good stuff. Raven, of course, everybody knows. Some of their other poetry I didn't like, but whatever, it's cool. The price is right. I got this for $7.76, $7.50. Yeah. So, on to Poe's contemporaries. And Poe had some really cool contemporaries, too. Yeah. So, Poe died in 1849. He was writing up until 1942, for 1945 for these ones. But he started in 1927 was when he was first published, and that was some poetry, I believe. Now, yeah. So during that time, the same time, 25 to 49, we have a lot of his contemporaries as well. Starting at the beginning, Mary Shelley's last works. I don't know when Mary Shelley died. Does it say in here? Actually, it says on my notes. Scusi. Notes. Died in 1851. So yeah, right at the end of this is when she died as well. She, of course, didn't. She lived quite a bit longer than Poe did. She was quite a bit older than Poe was when they died. Even though they died about the same time. Well, really? Yeah. A decade or two older. The Last Man is one that Lovecraft mentions as sort of a... what did he call it? 38. He called it notable. Okay. And of course, I've mentioned transformations a few times. It's a... what was it called? Spatial fission, where the guy, the little demon witch guy, takes over his body, the guy's body, and I listened to it not too long ago. It was really good, though. I was actually expecting it to be awful, because I still don't like Frankenstein. I just didn't enjoy it. This was a lot quicker. Um, yeah. So, yeah, Transformations was 1820. Wrong button. 1831. Last Man was 1826. Thomas More had a poem called Alciphron, and then the same character popped up in a book called The Epicurean, essentially about Alciphron was an Epicurean sophist in ancient Greece. I'll get there. He went to Egypt and sort of got attacked, is the right word? He got involved in ancient Egyptian sorcery things. So sort of sorcery-ish things going on. Sir Walter Scott, actually, Lovecraft talks about him quite a bit. The Tapestried Chamber is 1828. What was the Tapestried Chamber? It was a ghost story. Oh yeah, it was a ghost story about a general who... It was pretty creepy. It was a general who stays in a room in a castle that his buddy lives in. And then comes to breakfast the next morning not being able to sleep because a woman walks by his bed. He says, "Hey, what's up?" to the woman. "What's going on? What are you doing here? What are you doing in my room?" She turns around and it's a corpse. And it gets really close to him too. Whoop. Like, okay, creepy. Yeah. And then he finds out it's the corpse. He sees the picture in the picture gallery as he's leaving. He's like, "I'm not staying in that room anymore. Catch you later." And he goes out to leave, and he sees a picture in the picture gallery of one of the guy's ancestress, whose deeds were too terrible to mention, or evil to mention, or something along those lines. And then what was the other one? Well, I'll mention Red Gauntlet, which had a ghost story of Wild Willie's? Wandering Willie's Tale in Red Gauntlet, which is another little ghosty part of another book, which wasn't part of this era, it was the last era, but I'm not going to go over Sir Walter Scott again. And then of course he wrote Letters on Demonology and Witchcraft, sort of a non-fiction thing, which was, as Lovecraft describes it, which still forms one of our best compendia of European witch lore. Now we go to the continent, to Honor de Balzac. Wild Ass's Skin was 1831. You put on the skin of an animal and you become the animal sort of deal is the gist I got from it. I haven't read it. Seraphita was 1835. This one that wasn't even described in Wikipedia. I don't know what it was, but Lovecraft mentioned it. And the other one was Louis Lambert, which wasn't mentioned in Wikipedia as well either. Also in France at this time, Théophile Gautier, one of Cleopatra's knights, was one that he mentions. Clarimond, 1836, is probably the reason I have this. It's very worth mentioning. Clarimond was an early female vampire story. So each time we go back, we had Dracula 2 or 3 videos ago. We had Carmilla last video, and now we have Clarimond, which was the first. Wikipedia said it was the first vampire novel to have holy water as a deterrent to vampires, or crosses in holy water as a deterrent to vampires. Religious symbology is a deterrent to vampires. Either way, definitely worth mentioning. There's a lot of those. Oh yeah, and this is the first time this pops up in this section. Whether you buy the father of the modern short story as one of Poe's claims, but first time holy water is used as a deterrent to vampires. That's worth mentioning. The Mummy's Foot, as far as I'm aware, is just a standard run-of-the-mill mummy story. I don't think that wasn't available on any information on Wikipedia. Prosper Merimee, if I'm probably mispronouncing that, the French people are gonna trip me up again. La Venus d'Ille, 1837, is a statue of obvious Venus of Ile, or however that's pronounced, Ile. Comes to life and kills the son because she thinks it's her husband. Statue coming to life and going on rampage. Golem, about 4 videos ago. So good to have another one. Now we go to Germany. Wilhelm Meinhold, The Amber Witch, 1839. This took place in the 30 Years' War in the 17th century. A girl finds a deposit of amber, keeps it hidden for whatever reason, brings out a bit every once in a while, and sort of becomes rich. Is accused of witchcraft because she's rich. Tortured until she confesses and about to be burned at the stake. Whereas, at which point her boyfriend comes and rescues her, and they go off together. And there's a real witch who dies horribly in prison, but I don't have that information. Where is it? Maybe I can get that. 46. Let me see if I can find that. The deeds of the real witch, who afterward comes to a horrible supernatural end in prison, are glibly imputed to the hapless Maria, whichever it is. No, Maria, because there's no H at the end. Come on, Drew. And after a typical witchcraft trial with forced confessions on torture, she's about to be burned at the stake, who's saved just in time by her lover. Gotcha. Nope. Wrong things. Alright. Oh yeah, Captain Frederick Marryat, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Where am I at my page-wise? Oh, The Phantom Ship, 1839, which was the legend of the Flying Dutchman. And in that book there is a tale called The Werewolf. That's why I have that note there. Actually, I'd like to know the tale of the Flying Dutchman, so I would like to check that out. Maybe I'll check out Captain Marryat's The Phantom Ship with the werewolf thing, because I'm werewolf-aholic. Edward Bulwer Lytton, Zanoni. What was the date on this? 1842. I looked up. I know of Edward Lytton, Edward Bulwer Lytton. He's the guy who's has the name of the Edward Bulwer Lytton Prize, which is for a horrible short story. And, he doesn't really deserve it. He's the guy who came up with the awful the awful opening line of a story. It was a dark and stormy night in one of his. So, and then of course Poe actually makes fun of that. He uses that. He mocks it in one of his stories. Drop my notes here. So, Bulwer Lytton gets a lot of crap, but he shouldn't. He's written some good stuff. And he coins a lot of phrase. The pen is mightier than the sword. That was one of the phrases he's coined. The unwashed masses and pursuit of the almighty dollar. So quite a. But he also wrote weird fiction. Let's get to that. The House in the Brain, I should have talked about last time if I were on top of things, but I'm not. That was 1851. 1859. Zanoni was one that Lovecraft talks about for a bit. The plot was this witch, master of sorcery or whatever, will not become mortal until he falls in love. And then, of course, obviously, to make the story go someplace, he falls in love. And then dies in the French Revolution. So apparently, this is weird. It was weird and magical and mystical and whatnot. And grab my thing here. And apparently, it gave Charles Dickens the idea for the ending of Tale of Two Cities. Which is weird, because apparently Bulwer Lytton and Charles Dickens were buddies. And, there's usually a little thing at the bottom of Wikipedia pages talking about what adaptations there were for books. And they had Hancock as one of the adaptations, and I can sort of see it from what was described. I don't know why. It's so weird, but it's so weird. Hancock was a movie in 2008 with Will Smith as like a superhero, like pretty much all-powerful guy who, when he falls in love with a woman, Charlize Theron, I think it was, who is an immortal person too, they both start becoming mortal, and and less all powerful, and stop being superheroes. So I sort of see what the point, how that was an adaptation, but it's just so weird. Hancock is an adaptation of a Bulwer Lytton story. I dropped that thing again. Whatever. Let's see. What else do we have here? Nathaniel Hawthorne, Mosses from an Old Manse. I talked about Hawthorne, House of Seven Gables last time, because that was 1851, and this is 1844. Poe famously criticized Hawthorne quite a bit, because Hawthorne's spooky stuff are moral tales, and Poe, and Lovecraft along with him, don't want morals in their spooky tales. They just want spooky tales. They don't want it to be a lesson for somebody. It's not the point of it. If you're going to scare somebody, don't make it be a moral lesson. Just let it be a scary story. I buy that too. And I don't mind being critical of Hawthorne because I'm not really a huge fan. Out of Mosses from an Old Manse, one of the stories that I was forced to read as a child, as a high schooler, was Young Goodman Brown. I hated it. It's not bad in retrospect, but it's not don't force high schoolers to read it. Um, it's about a guy who's going about something bad business, and he sees a vision of everybody in his town at a Black Sabbath, including his wife. So he freaks out, and he freaks out, and he runs home, and it was all a dream, sort of, not really. Another one that I saw in here was Rappaccini's Daughter, which seemed pretty cool. I do have it on LibriVox, but I haven't listened to it yet. That was about a poison guy who tends poisonous plants, and he gets his daughter to tend poisonous plants, and his daughter becomes immune to the poisons, but poisonous herself to other people. Kind of cool. It's a good concept. I haven't listened to it to be able to judge it one way or another. It's on my list. So many things are, though. Dropping down, Wuthering Heights, 1846. These are in general chronological order. I don't know how much influence one had on the other. I don't know exactly when the English translations of Balzac and Gautier and Merimee and Meinhold were, or how when the English translations of into French or German were made. So I don't know how influential one was to another, or how long it took for some things to get transported from across the Atlantic for Britain and America to interact. But Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights, 1846, it's ghost-y, sort of. It's known as a romance, and it is a romance, but there's ghosty elements. There's certainly evil people elements. Heathcliff and Catherine were not good people. It's not my favorite story ever. It's not bad. But it's ghosty. Lovecraft mentions it, so I said, what the heck, I'll mention it too. That's basically my reasoning behind there. And George William Reynolds, he wrote Wagner the Werewolf, or Wagner the Werewolf, depending on how you want to pronounce that. 1846, and Faust, 1847. That's an updated version, I'm sure, of the earlier Fausts. And I have a note here that's Penny Dreadfuls, because I wanted to actually talk about Penny Dreadfuls because, well, George William Reynolds, the article on Wikipedia actually mentioned it. I was like, oh yeah, I wanted to talk about Penny Dreadfuls anyway, so I'm going to. I have my Wikipedia of Penny Dreadfuls up. Penny Dreadfuls were the precursor of the pulp fiction from the time Lovecraft was writing. Lovecraft published a lot of stuff in Weird Tales, of course, as I mentioned, and those pulp stories, and of course Robert E. Howard, also a pulp writer who published in Weird Tales and other things, his Conan stuff, Conan the Barbarian, if you're a movie fan. Conan stuff was, pulp. Before pulps, there were penny dreadfuls, which were British in the late 19th century, or early 19th century even. Wikipedia describes it as cheap sensational fiction, printed on cheap pulp paper, and aimed primarily at working class adolescents. So, youngsters with money, they only cost a penny per issue, and they were, you had a couple chapters of each story. Sorry, I was reading something on the side here. A couple chapters of several books. So you'd have to get the whole story. You'd have to get there, but there'd be some dreadfulness to it. Not it was dreadful writing. Sometimes it was, obviously, but it's not the point. It's dreadful because it was, blood and guts and stuff that my mom wouldn't appreciate me reading, like horror. Sorry, Mom. Stuff for mothers to say to their adolescent youths, why are you reading stuff like that? It's dreadful. And it doesn't stop us. So, how far? Started in the 1830s. Dickens was probably a bit above the penny dreadfuls. He was a serialized person as well, but he was all his stuff came out in serial form. Great Expectation to be a chapter, then a month later another chapter, etc. All his books were like that, serialized. Not some of his short stories with ghosts and stuff would be in pulps, but some would be in more respectable magazines. Oh, froze there for a second. That wasn't good. Reprints of older books, which of course we'll get to later. A. Milne. Why does that name sound familiar? Oh, because he wrote Winnie the Pooh. That's why. Yeah. So, and then these guys are the precursor of the pulp magazines of the 20th century, 1910 to 1950s. Maybe even they probably survived in the 60s, some of them. And then, of course, they were sort of replaced by, mass market paperbacks. Not that these are cheap or whatever, but, Bain Publishing. For horror, you're looking at Tor, and others. There's lots of out there. So people who are publishing in paperback writers, as Lennon and McCartney sang. Before they got, before you had to pay your dues by printing paperbacks only, like today. Today you probably have to pay your dues by doing electronic books only, and then going to paperbacks only, and then if you get quite good sales, then you go to you can do hardcovers for your next books. So that's sort of publishing history 101 for you there. So that is about this time period. Poe and his contemporaries. Next time, I'm going to drop back another 25 years, try to get pre-Poe. See what I can do with pre-Poe, and then we're starting into the Gothic stuff. I don't know what I'm going to do for the century, the 18th century, the 1700s. There's not a heck of a lot. I might just say, and everything in between, or 2 videos for everything in between. Or, sorry, not in between. Everything before 1799. I don't know. I'll figure that one out. Next time will be pre-Poe. Still some good stuff. E.T.A. Hoffman's going to be coming up. Washington Irving. Polidori. Frankenstein. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Okay. I think I have an idea. Alright. So later, folks. I'll talk to you. I'll see you next time. We'll continue with History of Horror. My name's Drew. Thanks for watching Horror Analysis. Have a great night.